Hi everyone, thank you for coming. My name is Noah Ferguson and my partner's name is Allie Thibault. We had the Tata Consultancy Services group assigned to us, and today we'd like to talk about that. So as far as some background, the Tata Consultancy Services, it was first started up in 1968. It was initially a division of the Tata Group, and some of the things they first performed were just internal IT services for the Tata Group. They first dipped their toes in external service when it began to seek new businesses in the US and the UK. These were very small, but that was the first external. TCS stuck to the basics, initially offering just IT maintenance, a little bit of development and application early on in their service history. After 10 years of consolidation and more external work, TCS was the largest software service provider in India. They were able to achieve all the success because of their cheap labor and their cheap labor sources. They were also able to achieve a little bit more success by pioneering the remote project management tool. This allowed less in-person work and a lot over the phone and over the computer work, which obviously would speed up processes. By the early 90s, TCS was able to provide many complex IT services. Some of these were application development, system integration, testing and solutions. So when TCS was able to provide more complex IT services, the West definitely came around and had a huge demand for their services, especially since they're at such cheap cost due to the large pool of cheap skilled engineering talent that India had to offer. In response, TCS led the creation of the business processing outsourcing, which is the BPO. So it's the Indian version of a union for outsourcing companies, which TCS definitely benefited from. And with these rapid expansions and really just the technological growth in the past couple years, TCS employees have actually been able to obtain more competency and industry knowledge with all this work going on. Due to this, they're able to tackle much larger problems because of the accumulation of vast amounts of experience. So at this point, that's really TCS's largest benefactor.
In an effort to stay in the game and be closer to their overseas clients, TCS began what's known as nearshoring by placing roughly 55 local delivery centers all over the world, closer to particular clients. These locations included places such as Hungary for the European clients, Uruguay for the Central and North American clients, and China, among others. These development centers were particularly chosen because they were close to the client, but the countries in which they were placed still had low labor costs as compared to hiring within a client's country or paying for work visas to send consultants in. TCS is huge on training, spending roughly 30% of their revenue on new and continuing education training and development programs for all new hires and current employees. Their policy was to send staff from diverse geographical locations to India to work on projects for understanding how TCS functioned. Essentially, TCS would take new hires and have them work for a period in India to learn the company and the clientele. This became a large problem for TCS, particularly when setting up operations and new training centers in China to try and capitalize on the large number of fresh engineering graduates. TCS's main problem comes down to a lack of cultural understanding and global perspective. Without recognizing it, TCS was essentially bringing not just company culture, but also Indian culture into all of these countries and forcing both upon the new hires. They were trying to model their new training and development centers off their successful platform in India, rather than adapt each program to the needs and culture of their new center's country. To adapt TCS's training model to work well and add value to TCS's IT capability in China, several changes need to be made to address and be more mindful of China's differing culture and values. When TCS first moved into China, their name was not well known. They knew they had to establish ties on university campuses just as they had in India. However, TCS failed to learn much about in China's education system. There are two problems that arose here in conjunction with one another. The first being that China's engineering and software programs focused mainly on hypothetical scenarios rather than real-world problems, and the second being that TCS made no effort to see this and begin implementing training during the students' final year of university, just like they did back in India. In India, TCS hired developers that scored high enough on an exam and were in their junior year directly from universities, and then expected the students to begin the induction training during their senior year after being hired. When TCS made moves to China, ties and relations to universities were made, but training did not begin until after graduation, which posed issues because of the university's lack of training of real problems. TCS needs to begin training earlier, or at least work with each campus to develop an accurate program, either in the classes or separately, that will bring the students up to speed before they graduate, so that there is pre-hiring training as well as post-graduation training. Once students graduated, TCS's training and development programs began for the new hires in China. The second lack of global cultural understanding arose here because training was only offered in English, which is not a first language in China. While most could speak and understand the language, it was very minimal and broken, so to speak, which likely not only caused frustration for the trainers and trainees, but also led to miscommunication and a lack of understanding of crucial concepts. When sending global hires to the India Development Center, English is fine to teach and communicate with. However, when TCS moved operations into China, they should have had trainers readily available who could speak either both English and Chinese or Mandarin, or supplied translators to teach in the region's native tongue, depending on where in China they were. The language barrier that is present here needs to be broken and re-bridged to teach and communicate by adapting the training to the native language, rather than asking the new hires to further adapt to TCS. Another major issue TCS faced in the way of global perspective came when they faced a shortage of qualified middle management. There shows here probable cultural bias on TCS's behalf because while qualified Chinese middle management was available, the shortage caused them to be quite pricey in terms of salary. Instead, TCS went the route of bringing in outside middle management from India to avoid paying the higher salaries to the already qualified Chinese prospects in their own country. To combat this, TCS should take risks by hiring Chinese graduates with certain skill sets and give them the necessary training required to master the skills of management. TCS's training and development program had become too broad. They could stand to create specialized niches depending on the need of the region. China lacked quality low-wage middle management, so therefore TCS should train a new group to grow into these roles and fill the positions. This would be especially beneficial because by adapting the training program to not only fit the engineering and software aspects, but also the management side of the consultancy, TCS would be responsible for closing the supply and demand gap of these specialized workers. While it may take money up front to hire and train people to fill these roles, TCS will gain net profit from the investment because of their ability to set the wages. To reiterate, TCS's global training and development program, while excellent, should be mindful about adapting to each country's culture. While these programs are likely occurring at many of these nearshore development centers, the problems in China could be disastrous if not adapted as quickly as possible by bringing training to universities before graduation, closing the language barrier, and combating cultural bias by taking risks to hire and train in specialized needed niches.